For a long time, I thought setting goals was about living to my fullest potential and becoming these one top percent people on planet Earth and having a successful life and all that gibberish that we normally listen to in YouTube videos that talk about resolutions at this moment of the year. Every single year, I would start a new method, super motivated, but I would end up exhausted and burnt out in less than a month, quitting, and even worse, ashamed that I couldn't keep up with my own expectations that I set on myself, judging every single experience of life and measuring every single habit, tracking every single task to see if I was being productive. And I would end up feeling trapped in a self-disappointment loop. What I didn't know back then is that we tend to take methods online very literally, and that setting goals has nothing to do, in fact, with achieving those results, or not even about the direction. It's about the becoming. It's about the discovery of you at the end of the year, saying, this is the version that I have become and I like it. But I get it. Direction plays a huge role when your brain doesn't work linearly, like it happens to people who, like me, have ADHD. And most neurotypical methods to achieve goals are just not working when managing your hyperactivity and staying focused are already a full-time job. Hello, I'm Eva Amory, and this is Humans Academy, the place where we use the therapeutic power of the narrative arts. Welcome to episode 4 on a Christmas day. And today I'm going to teach you my very personal yearly goals method. A method that took me over 7 years to master in less than 30 minutes. This is the method that I use to have in check my ADHD symptoms without burning out. Also, it uses a very scientific approach where the focus is on the person that you are becoming and not that much on the process or the results. So if you are looking for a different, neurodivergent and philosophical way to structure your life in 2026, this video is for you, especially if you come from a background of trauma, addictions, or, as I said, neurodivergence. I promise you that by the end of this episode, you are going to change your mind on how you've been approaching your life goals. So let's get started. Before we dive into the structure, I want to talk to you about the environmental and materials that you're going to need when you go through this process. Every year, I book between 7 days and 10 days to reflect on where I am in personal terms, in professional and psychological terms, and decide who is the new version that I want to become. I want to have undivided attention to that. So as a person with ADHD, I have a lot of hypersensitivity to the environment, and I realized I needed like 3 basics in my environment. So much so that I decided to write a post that I'm going to link somewhere, maybe in the description box, because I think those are 3 very underrated things that everyone should pay attention to when going through a decision-making process that is going to be as important as to set your goals for the entire year, especially if you have hypersensitivity as I do. For the materials, what you are going to need is your handwriting journaling. But if you haven't, because you were not handwriting and tracking your life in 2025, don't worry. You only need to take your phone or any electronic device that you have been using for exploring yourself and the world around you. You have to have an idea of the platforms, maybe social platforms or apps that you have been using for tracking, in case that you have them. And hopefully you have plenty of things saved in those platforms. For example, if you go to Instagram, you have like folders where you have been saving the pictures or the workshops that you have been doing or something like that. And if you go, for example, to your WhatsApp or whatever app you use for chatting in your country, that you can see all the archives. And so you can have an overview after going through all these platforms and apps of what are the things that you have been interested in or you have invested your time in 2025. And that is going to be your material. Doing an inventory list is how we acknowledge your new version that you have become compared to the one you were at the beginning of the year. But it's also an opportunity to hold ourselves accountable and ask, do I like the version I am becoming? So this is a moment to sit down and with undivided attention reflect on all those things, all those big achievements or the biggest achievements that we have accomplished in 2025. We are going to do lists by sections or the dimensions that you have been focusing on during your 2025. For example, in my case, I can show you mine. I have studies, I have professional, project related, which is this community. I have life related, and I included a new section in 2025 called Don't Forget. If you are now considering going into coaching journaling, you definitely want to have a section of the achievements you got in 2025 related to skills, teaching, certificates, courses, online webinars and workshops, everything that you have acquired. You want to have that list to see where are you coming from and where do you want to go. If you are instead thinking about practicing more healing journaling, you definitely want to have a section called Don't Forget. And this section was for me to highlight and see clearly what are the biggest struggles I was going through in 2025. And to see those, like, don't forget you have gone through all this shit and that you have survived, and probably writing down also the huge achievements or the lessons that you have learned through that process. In my case, for example, spirituality is a huge dimension I have in my life. In fact, I would say that spirituality is my North Star. It's the one dimension I have with the biggest score, because for me, spirituality is like the one dimension that sticks all the other dimensions together. It's like the glue. So for example, in my case, going through journaling, for example, is vital. Those are things that I want to have highlighted in my inventory. In fact, doing this inventory is for me a ritual. So it's part of my spirituality. It's where I sit down and I take acknowledgement of the new version of myself, and it's like honoring and celebrating this new human that is here today and has brought me from the beginning of 2025, and is for me a closure kind of celebration and ritual. I would suggest you do every single year the same, so you can acknowledge and celebrate yourself. I think every human needs and deserves to celebrate themselves. Now that you have gathered all the information you need, you are going to be applying the Wheel of Life self-coaching self-assessment tool. And if you're not familiar with this tool, which is super cool, by the way, this is a graphic where you're going to be able to see at a glance your level of satisfaction with life in this very moment, after acknowledging what you have done last year and also taking into consideration the skills that you want to develop next year. A caveat here from my side is that you apply your scientific approach as much as you can, meaning you need to observe your life with a very honest and non-judgmental perspective of life. Instead of getting into an insider perception, go and take an outsider perspective. The more you do this, the more accurate this tool is going to be. If it's the first time that you're using this tool, maybe you want to go online and write down on Google the Wheel of Life template or something like that. I'm pretty sure you're going to have plenty of them to download with the dimensions of life that they took from default. But what I would suggest you is that you can download a template where you can customize it. I'm gonna link in the description box also the one that I have from the website of Coaching the Leap. So you can right away download that one, but you can take the original one with the default dimensions of life or customize your own. I personally prefer to customize it because I want to choose what are the dimensions of life that I consider more important, and also thinking about which ones are going to be more important for me in the next year. So for example, we have a client who wants to pay attention to his health during the year 2026. But because he also wanted to focus on fitness, he decided to take out of this umbrella term or dimension term the fitness section, so he can also measure what is his level of satisfaction, because he was not satisfied with how he is dealing with his fitness and he wants to improve that in the next year. I was also reflecting on when I was going through my recovery, and if I would have had this tool when I was in the very beginning of that process, I think I would have created an entire wheel of life with the recovery process. So for example, I would have done like a dimension that was about my therapeutic improvement and my sessions. Or if I'm going through group therapy, I would have created another section that would be for improving in those. Then definitely I would have loved to have a dimension that was called triggers. And I would have created a set of non-negotiables in order for me not to negotiate with myself. So for example, if I would start having thoughts of, I'm gonna just drink one drink with alcohol in 1 month or something like that, I would have said, that is a boundary I have crossed and I'm not going to negotiate. And I would see how many triggers I have and how many thoughts of relapsing I have. This would be very good. What if I told you that there are 3 major and common resources intrinsic to the human experience that are going to determine our success in achieving our goals? And those are money, time, and energy. Being realistic about how much of these 3 resources you have is going to be vital in your process of this method. Taking into account how bad we humans estimate what we can do in 1 year versus 10 years, meaning how much we overestimate what we can do in 1 year versus we underestimate what we can do in 10, the best thing to do is to set goals long term, playing the infinite game. And this is the essence of this entire method. If you really understand that the meaning of life is not what you get, the material things, the money and the skills, but the person you become, chances are that you are already playing the infinite game. And for that, you have probably embarked yourself in a beautiful self-discovery journey, trying to live in alignment with who you are meant to be, not only for yourself, but also for others. Ironically, there is no better way to find our meaning of life and play the infinite game than giving away your finite resources. Meaning, if you want to tap into what is important for you, you just have to ask yourself, how do I want to spend my money, my time, and my energy, which are my very finite resources? And that I found to be one of the biggest paradoxes of life. And the importance you give to each of them is going to also be related to how much you think you have of them, setting you in a journey to create more of that one. My suggestion here is that instead of creating goals to create more of those resources that you question this assumption, what I noticed is that talking about energy, time, and money is the same as talking about health, fulfillment, and freedom, respectively. This sets a huge different framework for achieving your goals, because now the end game is to live according to your values, being in alignment with them, and having the best health ever in order to play that game as long as possible. So from now on, your goal is not to achieve very specific goals at the end of 2025. It's to go at the end of your life saying, fuck yeah, all the health or the energy, all the time, and all the money invested paid off. This is what Simon Sinek book called Finding Our Why. In the description below, I'm going to leave for you my document with questions where I analyze and reflect how I am investing or wasting these finite resources. Because now the idea is that you examine how you are wasting or investing them. Where do you want to go? And the next phase is going to be for closing that gap. Once we have awareness on how we are spending our limited resources, it's time for us to finish and complete our wheel of life. The dimensions that we are detecting are important for us. And on the other hand, start thinking about a long-term goal, maybe for the next 5 to 10 years. So for example, last year, I set a goal that I want to reach in 2030, and hopefully it's materialized then. If you don't know yet where do you want to go in 10 years or something like that, don't worry. I would suggest that you apply a very interesting approach called wayfinding from the book Designing Your Life by Bill Barnett and Dave Evans. I found out about this approach and book thanks to Ali Abdaal, who is also a YouTuber, a content creator, but also expert in productivity. I would suggest you go and check also about his content. I found this approach very interesting because what it says is that you are going to find your way as you go. You don't need to have all the information and have like a clear vision, 100% certainty of where you want to go. And I would even suggest no one on planet Earth knows exactly the direction where they want to go. Because even if you have a very clear vision, something can come out in your life and drastically change what you have set yourself for. Just knowing or having an idea of where you want to go is enough. One of the biggest concepts of this book is that you set yourself for little experiments where you can test what you are doing, your actions, the little actions that you're taking for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or for the next 3 months are in alignment with who you are and what do you value in life. Some of the questions I invite you to reflect upon are: what's important to you at the moment? What does your ideal future looks like? What would be a great investment of time in 5 years? What are some skills you need to achieve that future? What challenges are you facing at the moment? What would make you feel that your life has been worth living? For this phase, you're going to need to set a plan for your finite game, but if not for your 10 or 5 years goal. My suggestion here is that you make it super simple. Basically asking yourself what are going to be the milestones that you need to get by the end of each year, the biggest milestones. And you can use the assistance of AI. So if you know how to prompt with ChatGPT or any AI tool that works as an assistant, then you can just put your prompts and decide what are very realistic goals that you can achieve each year. And then once you have an idea, you can see what are going to be the milestones that you need to accomplish by the end of 2026. Another suggestion is that you go on the YouTube channel of Ali Abdaal, which is this creator I suggested to you before, because he has created an AI for this specific goal, which is setting the milestones for having a long-term goal. I don't know how long this is going to be available, but you better go and check. If not, I can also leave in the description the link. This phase for me is the simplest one. Like, you don't have to think thoroughly and super crazy, just having an idea, but a very realistic, or as realistic as possible, of where do you want to go and what are the milestones. That is more than enough. As Ali Abdaal also says in his video, when we set ourselves a journey for a goal, we need to have a plan, but we also need a system. And as he beautifully explains in a metaphor, while our plan is the bridge from where we are to where we want to go, our systems are the steps we take. I have discovered that in my case, I set my systems within brackets, 2 methods that I use every single year. And probably these brackets have been the ones I've been staying with for the longest, like these 7 years, every time I want to accomplish something. Those are the brackets that give me the structure for me to follow that system. So it's not the tracking of the steps or the quality of my steps. It's more like the frame in which I'm going to give those steps. And those are the quarterly method and the domino effect. When choosing what I want to achieve in 1 year, normally I tend to pick like between 3 or 5 goals, no more than that. And the other thing I want to do with my goals is that they are not coming from many different dimensions of my life. I try that they are related somehow and they are coming from 2 or 1 different dimensions. And if those dimensions can be somehow correlated, even better. And that is precisely the key ingredient behind these 2 frames. You don't want to have many goals and you don't want them to be super different from one another. Knowing how much my brain craves for novelty makes me super aware of my difficulties and tendencies to have a love and hate relationship with familiarity and consistency. So one of the things that I have come to is that no matter how, I need to have some basics in my routine. And what I have discovered long time ago is that whenever I feel super overwhelmed by my routine, I would change them into rituals, which is a concept that we are going to explore in January. So stay tuned if spirituality and rituals and ceremonies are a huge part of your life, or if you want to improve and increase your spirituality. I try to keep very low chances that I overload my plate with new things, which is my tendency. I love novelty. That's why I started using these 2 brackets when it comes to applying the systems. That is why I introduce 1 goal every quarter, every 3 months. So what I would do is I keep with that goal for 3 months and then I will introduce another one for another 3 months. But what I tend to do is if I don't see myself or I don't feel myself confident that I can keep track with the first one that I have introduced, I would not introduce a new one. I would keep with the same one for 6 months, which means have a year with just 1 goal, but that is more than okay. And I want to be responsible with how much I put on my plate because I know how frustrated it feels. This is vital for people who go through recovery. I mean, if you are going, and especially if you are at the beginning of your recovery process, please consider staying with your self-care basic habits for as long as you need until you feel comfortable and confident to incorporate new changes in your life. I remember my first year of recovery, I would focus in just one thing. In that moment, I discovered was the most important thing, which was self-regulation. As a person who has experienced disorganized attachment, and if you are not familiar with this term, I would suggest you go and check attachment theory online, and you're going to find so much information. But that is also another topic that we are going to be exploring on this community. That was for me an entire year of trying and developing the basic skills to self-regulate. I started co-regulating. In that moment was with my then partner and also with my new pet, with my new dog, and slowly getting a more secure attachment. And I remember the most challenging part of that was to adapt to a safe environment, an environment in which there was no chaos, everything was smooth. And the biggest challenge was my self-sabotage and trying to control everything and being hyperactive most of my time. So that is already a full-time job. Please consider focusing in one or two things if you're going through your recovery process. So now I want you to go to your wheel of life and definitely choose 2 or 3 areas of your life that you want to improve and you want to focus on in 2026. Ask yourself if there is any area in your life right now that needs urgent attention. And if not, rank them by personal preference, importance, or whatever you feel like a priority. The second bracket you want to use is the domino effect. The best way to describe this system is keeping up the momentum. In short, this system allows you to achieve as many goals as possible. Here, the strategy is that you choose your goals in such a way that when you have accomplished the first one, it's going to be super easy to accomplish the second one. So for example, if you want to achieve one first goal, that goal is going to have some characteristics that are similar to the second goal. And you are going to do that with the 3 or 4 or 5 goals that you want to get at the end of the year. Or maybe you want to acquire a very difficult skill throughout your year, but you want to divide the different stages of that skill in each quarter. So by the end of the year, you have acquired an expertise. This part is for me the one from my own method that I find I need to think the most. I remember the first time I introduced the domino effect in my own system, I stayed 4 and 3 days thinking carefully how would the pieces of my domino fall down. And it's my experience also with our clients, because I see they normally tend to see where is the problematic piece of the domino in their life, but normally they don't diagnose very well what is the solution. So for example, if you have bad sleep hygiene, which is what happened to me, think carefully how you want to tackle that. You want to improve your sleep as soon as possible. And if you're not doing some kind of exercise, you should consider that. In my case, I realized that exercising was the first thing I needed to do in order to start my domino effect. Many recent studies show that cardio exercise is no longer enough in order to have a good, maintained health than cardiorespiratory fitness. If we don't have health, we are going to be impacting any other area of our lives. Also, you want to stay on this planet as long as you can. Please consider at any given time during this year, in any quarter, you don't have to do it in January, of course, but consider introducing weight exercise and let me know how is going that experiment. Give your human the best life possible, especially at the end of this life, which is when we need it the most. It's going to always pay off. Now, this last part is for me the one where you get to customize and be more creative according to your own personality, because this is the part where you choose the techniques that you want to use for tracking, reminding, and somehow also being accountable of the sections or the dimensions of life that you want to focus on. So, for example, in my case, I only chose to have a weekly tracker where I said like all the things I've been doing during the week and quarterly review. So then I have like a very simple graphic where I say, okay, did I accomplish what I wanted to do in this first quarter? Yes, no. That goes at the end of my notebook. And then another one with prompts. And that is like a journal. And that is where I sit down and reflect thoroughly and in more depth about what were the things that I have found to be more difficult, etc., etc. Apart from that, I would say some alarms, things like that I would use, but that's it. And then I have these sections that I use almost every single year. Sometimes it might vary, but normally are the same. And I want to share with you. So, for example, I have skills, which I already kind of mentioned, but I can also describe it. Is where I register every skill I learn, whether that's from a book, a workshop, webinar, online course, YouTube tutorial, all of that goes to skills. Then I have decision making, where I apply my own method. And this is something I promised you in the last episode. I remember that. So I'm going to link in the description my own methodology for making decisions. Then I have brainstorming, where I write down all the crazy ideas I have for future videos like this one, and also coaching sessions, inspirational content, etc. But basically it's more to have like a very quick overview of all the things I want to put inside every episode or inside even my psycho educational sessions. And then a new section that I have included this year is called systems. And this main goal is for me to have a space where I can master the art of my own creative process. I already saw some patterns in the way that I organize my creativity process. And I'm also super interested these days consuming a lot of content on other YouTube creators or creators in general who are showing their own creative process. And so I'm doing the same, the pick and choose for my own creative method. So maybe in the future, you are going to see another video like this, but showing my creative process. This is what author Steve Pressfield would call the artist's journey. So I've come out of my hero's journey through addiction and other struggles in my life. And now I want to go into my artist journey. That was it for today, guys. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, this method that you can take anything you want from it and dissect it and use those things that you have liked the most. Please let me know if you introduce any of these techniques and tools and systems into your life. Keep healthy. Keep playing the infinite game, please. And I see you for the next episode where we are going to be exploring spirituality, rituals, and how to combine them to have a more fulfilling life. See you on the next episode. No freaking way. There is another fly here. I just killed the other one.